You're listening to On Guard, where we chop it up with everyday people who do extraordinary things. If you're inspired by what you hear, all I ask that you give us a follow and share with a friend. Today's guest is Zhao, a personal friend of mine that I had the pleasure of bringing on the podcast. Will is incredible for the reason that he is actually doing pre-med in college and running a business on the side, which speaks great volumes on his insane work ethic. So please join me in giving me a warm welcome to Zhao. Thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
So Will, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jackson.
So how'd you get started?
So for me, I was going through life, like especially in high school and before then, I basically had my life planned out for me by my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came to picking up like, oh, what major are you going to do in college? What college are you going to go to? I realized that I wasn't thinking for myself in the sense that I didn't know what to think. Everything I've ever thought was fed to me, basically. My plans were laid out for me. People did the thinking for me. And I thought that maybe I should do something more. Like I've been thinking about making money online, but I've never done it. I've thought about a lot of things, but I never actually took the first step and committed to it. So just to prove to myself that I could make money online, I started an agency, took a year, and then I started making money online. And it's been a really transformative experience.
So what would you say is like the most transformative part? Because I know a lot of people, they go into, a lot of people think making money online is kind of like a get rich quick scheme, or people see it as scammy. And I feel like the difference in what we do is more, we're building a business rather than like a scheme. So how would you say, like what part of building your own business has been transformative in terms of online marketing?
I think it's understanding that there's different stages to learning. Like someone on the internet, some guru could tell you, do this, do X, Y, and Z. But most people, like what I used to do is you follow exactly what they do, expecting to get results. But that's not what you should be looking at. You should look a little deeper than that. You should look at what are the intentions behind that? What's the purpose? Why do they do this? Why do they recommend this? To have a little bit of higher thinking of the awareness and strategies involved in whatever technique or strategy or like hack you're learning. It's like there's an enlightenment. Once you understand a subject, then you can make connections much easier to other things you might find.
So would you say a lot of the people that try to start, digital marketing or the likewise, kind of go in it, like you said, for the money, they follow gurus, but they don't take the time to actually understand what they're, trying to sell and make money on. And that kind of leaves them, it kind of leaves them confused. And, like you said, making connections is really hard when you don't know what you're talking about. Like you can never really sell someone if you're bullshitting not only them, but yourself as well. So how would you say, like, what was your top 3 things you went through to kind of, make sure you could, like, for yourself understood what you were talking about and had the confidence to go ahead and network?
So the first thing I realized was that confidence was, you are who you say you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant whatever I said I was going to do, I'm going to do. So now, like, even if I said something like a few days ago, a month ago, and it's coming up right now that I said, not even a promise, I'm not like, oh, I promise you I'm going to do this. I'm just say like, oh, I'm going to go there. Like, even if it's inconvenient for me, I'm still going to show up, because I realized that you first have to be aligned with yourself, that you clearly know who you say you are, and you know that maybe you're not where you want to be right now, but you'll get there in like tomorrow or next year or 10 years. That you're always getting better. The second thing is it's being aligned with your intentions. I had a really rough time getting started because like our generation, we just grew up with our phones, we grew up with social media, like YouTube, like you know how addicting it is. Like sometimes you think you're learning, but you're just going down this YouTube rabbit hole and you're not actually doing anything anymore. So I would say just being able to focus on something that's not rewarding right now, but will be rewarding like a delayed gratification, right? There's no consequence to doing homework, right? If you do it right now, like what are you going to get? Nothing.
Yeah.
And kind of working on your business is kind of like that too. It's like the initial upfront work. You're going to put in hours and hours, like hundreds of hours. You're not going to see any money. You're not going to see any results. Like when people ask you like, oh, how's your business doing? Like, because you told like that one friend or something like, or your parent, like, oh, I started a business. Like 3 months in, they're like, oh, how's your business doing? Are you making any money? You're like you're not gonna see any results, but now like you're like, oh shit, I'm making like money. I'm actually making like pretty good for a college student. And then the third thing would be having a hard mindset, like not being hurt by difficulties around you. Kind of like David Goggins, it's like when you feel pain, you want to give up. So once you're able to focus on something hard, it's hard for another reason because it's just in its nature, there's things you don't know and you're going to struggle and you're going to not succeed until you learn that lesson. Like, what is it going to teach me? And those lessons can be painful because you'll be like, oh, fuck, I was like ignorant my entire life, or I've been stupid for this, but you really aren't. You're just like a student in the journey. And the important thing is that if it hits you really hard and it hurts, don't give up.
So would you say in the process of, aligning yourself and kind of reframing your mind to be stronger? Because I feel like you said, a lot of people in our generation are addicted to their phones in like a negative way. And, they are doom scrolling, day in and day out. So did you do anything in particular to like, say like, you had to go back in to when you started and like, shake yourself and be like, hey, like how you have to, wake up a little bit and kind of figure out what you want to do. Because I feel like there is security in, doing what everyone else does, going to college, getting a good job, working for a boss. And like, you have to give up, have to relinquish the comfort, like you said, to really like, relinquishing short-term comfort for long-term goals. And how would you, if say you had to quit TikTok or YouTube, like what process did you use to kind of like fix your attention span really?
So when I first started like being an entrepreneur, I did what an entrepreneur would do, or I did what I thought an entrepreneur would do. Like I said, I was doing the action, but I wasn't thinking about the intention or the purpose behind every decision like entrepreneurs that you may look up to are doing. So what I did first to really get started was I did a dopamine detox, but it was really extreme. Like I could only use my phone for an hour a day. I had it set on grayscale, so it's just black and white. I deleted like Instagram. I deleted like basically every social media and anything that wasn't social media, but I felt like, like you could like end up playing around on too much, like Amazon, like I hid from the home screen. So my phone only has like one screen of apps. So it's like the app store is gone too. Like I hid it from the home screen. So it's just like Safari, the messages, and like my contact list. And the second thing was cold showers. Like this is all dopamine detox, like cold showers, 1 hour phone, no music. So wake up at 5, like a strict sleeping time and waking up time. Basically it was hell. Like compared to how you were living so comfortably. And you didn't even know that, right? So the first day it was great. I woke up at 5, like really excited. And the goal was that you can only derive happiness from doing work, like kind of pushing away all the other sources of dopamine, like no YouTube, nothing. And during that process, I remember that I was at Starbucks. I didn't get anything. I was just there for like the table. Yeah. Just to use the chair and table. And I got up to leave and I noticed how aligned with my intentions I was. When people like go to the door, they don't think about like, oh, I'm going to the door, I'm going to open the door. They just think about, oh, I just want to get to my car, right? What I noticed was that when I got up, I was very purposeful. I couldn't think about like, oh, what I'm going to do next, like anything that's going to give me dopamine, like, oh, I'm a little bit excited for like getting to my car or getting to that goal. I was just thinking like, I need to get to the door. I'm getting to the door. It was very purposeful. Like every moment I was focused on what I was doing rather than letting my mind drift off. But unfortunately, on like the 4th or 5th day, I started like deviating from my goal because I was still going to school at the time. I still am right now, but because you talk to people, you get sources of dopamine. I confused my mission. So this is a tip for anyone that does do dopamine detox, is that the goal is to remove sources of unwanted dopamine, but it's not to be unhappy. Like you can be happy. Just get rid of the passive stuff that's like buzzing around in your face. What I mean by that is I realized because I deprived myself of dopamine for about 3 or 4 days, I could feel whenever my dopamine would go up, like I would feel happy. Like I would notice it. You become more aware of like how you feel and how you think. And I noticed that I would be happier when I talk to people. So when I talk to people, I intentionally try to suppress the reaction and kind of screwed around with one of the human pillars of positive feedback loops. Yeah. For like reinforcing habits. And I was just really miserable for a little bit until I realized that I deviated from my goal. The goal isn't to be unhappy, the goal is to be happy with the right things, be happy from work, be happy from being productive, from accomplishing X, Y, and Z.
That's really interesting.
So,
I've done parts of that. I think
mhm,
I don't wake up at 5, but I do have my phone at grayscale. And I did, delete. Well, the problem that I face is if you do content creation, you kind of need some of the apps on your phone.
mhm,
So that distraction is there. I mean, if you do a dopamine detox, like cold turkey, like you said, I think that is probably the best way to do it. And I think it's powerful what you said about, you have to know why you're dopamine detoxing. Because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm just do a dopamine detox, and they don't kind of understand
yeah,
the intention behind it. They think like, oh yeah, if I don't delete TikTok and I delete Instagram, I'm going to be so much more productive. And like, you have to understand your why, or you're never going to
mhm,
like you'll kind of be lost. Like if you don't have I'm doing this because, then when you're doing the thing, you're gonna be like, well, why am I doing this? I can take a day off.
yeah,
I can skip. I can go through Instagram for a little bit, and it's really sorry. There's like little it's really easy to fall into these traps. I feel like because our society is one big positive feedback loop. You go on,
mhm,
get likes from Twitter, you get likes from Instagram, likes from Facebook, and I think be able to just suppress some things while kind of reinforcing the ones that are good for you. Like a lot of people talk about, especially like Andrew Tate types, talk about you have to be solitary, you have to be by yourself all the time, and you can't ever go out, can't ever party, can't ever enjoy your life. And I feel like that is the quickest way to burn out. And if you want to be in the game for a long time, you have to understand that your brain, like you literally cannot focus. Like there is studies about you cannot focus for, months and decades, like on one thing without ever deviating. Like it's literally impossible. So I guess that I'm going to ask you, how would you say, because you said you were miserable, how'd you kind of deal with getting out of that miserable state and not feeling burnt out? Because you have to do what we do for a long time. So how do we
mhm.
combat burnout and kind of make sure you can stay in it?
Yeah. So my original intention was starting dopamine detox was just like a week and then go into like monk mode, like kind of lighter version of dopamine detox. So during that time when I started that, I didn't really have a lot of the fundamental principles or like learnings I have now because I haven't met any mentors then. I only just finished reading Atomic Habits. So like I understood why I still deleted social media. It's like, oh, the mechanisms behind like make it hard to do a bad habit. But I was really miserable because I was fragmenting
Mm.
because I wanted to do something, but how I felt, I could feel like the dopamine. I could feel like I was happy talking to people or being at school. That I could feel that this was what I wanted to do. And like, why am I like being like this? And it actually fixed itself when a week later my friend invited me to go running. It was like spring break,
Mhm.
so my friend invited me to go running at like 5 a.m. because he also watches David Goggins.
Okay.
But in the middle of the night, I get a call. I was like, "Hey, what's up?" Like, it's like, "Oh, I'm here with like another friend of ours at a pizza place. We were thinking of following David Goggins, like whatever. And then, do you want to run at 5 a.m. tomorrow?" I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So next day, we were there at 5 a.m. It was dark, like it was like kind of winter, like early spring. It was freezing. I had like a hoodie on and a jacket over that, and that was the first time I ever ran 1 mile without stopping.
Oh, wow.
Like I couldn't make it a one lap around the track before. Like it was just all in my mind. I just didn't stop. And day two we ran like 2 miles. Day three we ran 3 miles. Like I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then I realized that maybe like I might have understood some mechanisms of why I should delete Instagram, why I should delete like Facebook or anything else so that makes sense. But I realized that I didn't understand everything else. Like, why do I take a cold shower? It's not for the medical reason. No, absolutely not. It's for your mind. Notice like how your mind is dedicated towards a task, being in the cold shower, but your body flinches away. So who really owns your body? So now I just like laugh in the cold shower because I'm like, I feel my body trying to run away. I'm like, ha ha ha, you're staying here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was because I was a little bit arrogant.
Mhm.
Like your misery tends to be because you think you're a little bit higher than who you actually are.
Mhm.
But when reality meets expectation, you're like a little bit less than that. Like you're in that little valley of despair. And you just have to understand that that's not permanent. You can climb out of it. Just keep on working on yourself, because if you can't do a goal now, would you think that it would be easier if you got better and you could rise to meet that level of demand, that level of difficulty later in life? So in order to do that, it'll be better to just keep on working on yourself regardless of what happens.
So you're saying that kind of maybe building a community around, because you had your friends, and I feel like a lot of people you talk to, like having a support system to kind of, because social media is technically a support system. So I think if you can fill that in with more positive avenues, it does definitely help. Like, I think I've had friends, and you can kind of tell which friends, like, I'm not saying to go out and, cut off everyone from your life, but I think there are people who can distract you from your goals.
Yeah.
And I think it's sometimes important to have those people in your life that are kind of on the same, like, it's much easier to have a goal with a group than it is by yourself. Like, say, I mean, I'm not saying cold shower with other people, but I guarantee if you had someone, if you're in the shower, you're freezing, your body's like, I want to get out of here, but your mind's there. And you had, again, a second level reinforcement where someone was like, you better not get out of that shower. I think it'd be a little bit easier to kind of stay in it. And I think that's great that you kind of were able to find the people so early, because, it's kind of contradictory what I said earlier, but, entrepreneurship is lonely, but it's not lonely if you do it with other entrepreneurs. So, or entrepreneurial type, not everyone owns a business, or not everyone.
Another part to that is you have to also be aware of what your friends mean to you. Like you said, like there's a difference between friends that you want to hang out during this phase of like building yourself up as an entrepreneur, and there's friends that you want around you to support you, but there's always that you can kind of tell through a feeling that maybe I shouldn't hang out with this friend, not because I don't like he's not a good person, it's because his goals right now is like maybe have some fun, like it'll distract you from your main purpose, because any fruit you get right now will be way sweeter than the suffering you'll have to go through.
Yeah.
But at the end of that journey, like nothing can compare to the rewards you'll reap at the end of that road. So it's like being aware of what each friend means to you. Like, is there like if you have a best friend, they always think out about you. They're like, hey man, like how are you doing? Or like, hey man, like I remember you were doing this, like do you need this, or do you need any help with that? Like they kind of offer their help to you whenever like they think about you.
So what would you say your gauges are for that? Like, I know you just touched on people kind of offering their help or in whatever way they can, because I feel like there are people better suited to handle certain tasks. Like that friend is more of an emotional support than a, entrepreneurial support. Because I think there's ways to find, especially, well, we've talked a lot about the bad parts of social media, but I think there is ways to utilize it to greatly impact your life in a positive way. So what's your take on maybe, having, I think I talked to Jordan about this. You have, some friends for kind of different parts of yourself, because as you I think one thing I struggled with was kind of losing myself in, I went to monk mode, I did the detox, and I felt like I didn't feel like myself for a really long time. I felt very kind of like, I knew I was changing, and I think that period of uncertainty of like what I was changing to be kind of led me into like, I was feeling lost. I was like, I don't know, like, you have the, like you said, value despair, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I just, go and finish out school? And I think, become comfortable again. And I think that is where a lot of people get lost in that very, you're changing as a person, but you don't know what you're going to change into. You're in the cocoon, but you don't know, you don't know where you're going. So how would you kind of give advice to people who are in that changing period, like we both are? And I think I've been able to kind of regain some of my personality, which I think is, what advice would you give to people who are going through that, changing period and don't want to lose themselves? Because I feel like ourselves, like we talked about before, is one of the most important things we can kind of bring to the table, because without being yourself, you're kind of like everyone else. And I feel like individuality is the only thing that makes us human. We just be, robots, same clone. So what did you do to make sure you kept your individuality while changing for the better?
So a thing I realized was that I did some more research. I'm a pre-med student, so like for me, like it's not that daunting to start reading up about like, oh, what are the chemicals in your food? What are the chemicals in your water? Like it's kind of what like I'm like the direction I'm going toward in my schooling.
Mhm.
So I'm not like that afraid to like research about it, like read up a little bit about it, understand just a little bit about it. And what I noticed in the beginning of my journey was that a lot of the things I had around me was like fake. Like social media, for example, what it does to your brain. Like it's like fake happiness.
Mhm.
Like the food, like fast food, fake happiness. Like, the sodium, the fat, the sugar, it just makes your brain happy, right? The tap water has like birth control in it. Like, I don't want to get into that too much, but like, I'm like, if you Google it, it's like, it says less than 1%. Why doesn't it say like there's no
Yeah.
birth control water? Why did it say less than 1%? So let's say just assume 1%, then for every 100 gallons of water you drink, like how much birth control are you drinking?
Yeah.
Close to a gallon? Like, like I'm not sure. I don't have any measurements for that, but I'm saying like it's not zero. And then I took a look at like Fruit Loops, like the some of the snacks that we have in the supermarket.
Mhm.
I was like, what the like all these like neurotoxin like give people birth defects, and I was like, oh wow, like growing up, like I haven't been eating like the best thing for my body,
Yeah.
right? And then I started questioning like what was around me, because one thing I noticed was that like my spring semester, my freshman year, I just went to school for school and I went home. I
Mhm.
used to hang out at school like first semester, freshman year, but second semester I just went to school, went home. Like I barely saw anyone.
Mhm.
And same thing during summer, I was like working on myself like super hard, like 5 a.m. mornings and like 11 p.m. nights, and just get that 6 hours of sleep, keep on going.
Yeah.
And when I came back, like for this for sophomore, like fresh fall sophomore year,
Mhm.
I realized that around the people that I knew, I became the same person I was like a year ago.
Interesting.
It was like the people around you kind of stimulate you to be who you were. Like you have the habit of yourself around this type of people, and you have friends that you have a different habit for, and you become like a little bit different around them. So then you realize that maybe you're not either of them. Like maybe there's some differences between each two. There's some similarities that is like the core fundamental part of who you are,
Mhm.
but most people don't notice how if they're with a certain group of friends, they act different. They're like, oh yeah, of course I'm different. Like this group of friends does this or that group of friends does that. But like, how does that change like who you are? Because like I said, confidence is you are who you say you are. But what if you keep on changing? Like, are you aligned with your intention, with your purpose? So I was worried about that because I was like, fuck, I like worked so hard for like hundreds of hours, and I was like, I don't feel any different. Like I fell back in the same habit. Like, what happened?
So do
And
you,
then that's when I realized
oh, sorry.
is that, yeah, it's okay. Like that's when I realized that maybe going into the journey, we don't know who we are.
Hmm.
And what we lose is that part of us that wasn't actually supposed to be with us. Like what the environment gave you, what growing up, like maybe you got fed some like poor information or poor mindsets, right? And I think you don't have to be too attached to your past self, because this journey, it was to kill our past self. It's to make sure today's me will absolutely beat yesterday's me.
So you think that well, I agree with you, actually. It's not, we think that it's important to, well, not only, you said you put in the hundreds of hours, which is what it takes. It takes hundreds and thousands of hours to really kind of reframe who you've been all your life. I think it's interesting what you said about, constantly being fed, well, fake food and fake information. And I think that is a product of our environment. And I think that's what we are. The environment you put yourself in is, behavior is directly correlated to environment. And if your environment is, lackluster, your behavior is going to be lackluster. And I think that's why you can fall into the traps of, hanging with the old friends and becoming, the old you. And I think it's important to know that you said like confidence comes from being able to stick to who you are. And I think that's probably maybe even why I had trouble with, because I was constantly, going from entrepreneurial Jackson to, college Jackson, which is,
Yeah.
like you're just like, I think you're almost at war with yourself. Like you're trying to become someone, great and motivational, and motivational, but you're like technically we're still young. You know what I mean? So, and even regardless of what we're doing externally to change ourselves, internally we are still changing. We are still growing up. We're about to go into the real world. Like there's a lot of changes, and your environment is constantly changing. So I think trying to be confident in yourself is, it's always difficult, but I think with the constant moving factors of life, it makes it even more so. And I think that's important to be able to really stick to what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally understand the student version of you is different than the entrepreneur. Like you're a student by day and an entrepreneur by night, or like 5 a.m. in the morning, and then like if you keep on switching. I was worried about that because like pre-med is like pretty like rigorous and like the amount of material you have to cover. And I did actually interview a plastic surgeon. His name is Dr. Sam Lam. And I had to ask him like, so I feel like I'm living like two lives right now, and it's kind of tearing me apart. Like, what would you recommend? Like, would you have any advice regarding that? I just wanted to hear like, what would someone that's made it through like the medical system would like say? And he said this. He said, "Don't worry about it. Like, it's not really two lives. Eventually, it's going to come together." And he kind of like quoted Steve Jobs. Like, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, but it was basically how you can't connect the dots going forward, but looking back, you can connect the dots in a straight line.
Interesting.
So like maybe right now they're not aligned, but eventually they will align. So I understand like most people that start this, like they have something else going on in life too. Like maybe they're a student, maybe they're like an employee, like whatever, right? I think it's important to understand like all these like student version or like worker version of you is like different than the entrepreneur version of you. Maybe right now it is. Maybe there's like a stark difference, but eventually you realize it's just all you. Like everything's you. Like anything you do is you. So it's to not think too deeply on getting lost. Like just don't get lost in the transition period. And to understand like everything's coming together. Like it's gonna be okay.
I really like that. I think I never heard that quote before, and I think it's very true because life isn't singular and experiences aren't singular. So in the moment, it's easy to feel like you said, like you wake up and you do school for 6 to 7 hours, and then you start your second day as an entrepreneur type, working a business, doing calls, outreach. So I think, like you said, you do learn. If you're not learning direct skills towards entrepreneurship, they're not going over in class how to do outreach through Facebook, but they are teaching you how to communicate, and they are teaching you how to, work as a team and work with people and meet people. And I think you're right. Like, well, I guess Steve Jobs is right as well. That you kind of, hindsight's 2020. Everyone's heard that. So I think, I guess, let me ask you this. So say you had like only 3 dots, what would those main 3 dots be that kind of connected? Like, you like look back and like, oh wow, like this was this.
I think the first dot, like let's say like the 0 dot is like point of origin was how I was before I started being an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I think the first dot I realized was that I'm working for myself. Like in school, if you don't do an assignment, there's like a direct punishment. Like, oh, your grade's gonna be bad, your GPA is gonna be bad, so you can't get into a good school. Like, because most of us growing up will be like, oh, you need a good school and you need a good job, because that's our parents' generation, which is like, oh, get a good job, like you'll be like stable for the rest of your life, right? And our generation is like, oh, we kind of want freedom, like we kind of don't want to live like that.
Yeah.
So the first realization was that there was no like direct punishment for like not working on your business or not being like, oh, like half-assing stuff. Like nothing will happen. Maybe 10 years later something will happen, but right now there's no like immediate result. It was the realization that no one will care for me as much as I would. So therefore I need to do the best quality of work I can for myself, because no one else will like do anything for it. Like this is like your own fight. Like you can't expect anyone else to hold your hand. Like, oh, like don't worry, like you can try better tomorrow. No, it's like I'll do my best today and I'll try even harder tomorrow. Like be even better tomorrow. It was that realization that no one's gonna look out for you like that. There's no punishment. There's no like motivating fear. There's no like motivation on the other end. You just need to be driven. I would say the second dot was getting a little bit of like higher thinking. Like I started meditating a lot more. I started noticing how my emotions would fluctuate, or I would stop myself and be like, why am I thinking like that? Or why am I feeling like this? Why am I feeling a little bit angry? Or why am I feeling a little bit anxious? Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was realizing that I had to be aware of how I'm feeling and also need to be aware of the underlying currents to whatever decision I make. Like, why did I just make that decision? Is it because of like a feeling, past experiences, or is it actually like logical? And why did other people make that? Because like persuasion and psychology and sales, you kind of have to understand that so you can kind of frame your questions or talk to a prospect and like see if they're a good fit for a product. And if they are, like, how do you convince them to buy? Like, trust you that you will get them the results that they've been looking for. So just understanding that everything, you need to plan everything with a deeper purpose. Like in chess, if you make the best move for every single like round, then like you'll be okay, but you'll lose to someone that makes the best move for this round and in 10 rounds. Like they think ahead. The best choice right now, you also need to make the best choice for 10 moves from now, like 3 moves, 10 moves, like however many moves you're pursuing, like this little battle you have, like trying to climb to where you need to be. Because the best move right now may not be the best move like 3 rounds later. You wouldn't know that unless you think about like, oh, like if I do this, will I lose some options, some like choices, some opportunities, like maybe like the next day, like the next week, or with this choice right now, like maybe it's like not as great as the other option, but it'll give me more opportunities, more potential later when I'm more built, when I help myself more, when I'm better spoken, that I can communicate with these entrepreneurs. Because before I was super introverted, like I couldn't talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
I was like kind of shy, and then I kind of become extroverted because I realized like people don't think that much about you. So I just realized like don't be afraid of talking to people. Like also going back to the second point, it's that being aware that people don't think about you as much as you think they are, right? And that was something that I needed to open up for myself because I was like, just because I'm a little bit anxious of talking to someone that's new, like someone I don't know, doesn't mean I shouldn't. Because maybe I'm suffering right now with that decision, but it can open doors for me like 10 rounds later. So thinking long and being aware of like the impact of your actions.
So would you
The third
say?
point.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I was
No,
going
go ahead.
and touch on because I also meditate daily, and I just wanted to kind of reinforce what you said because meditation is difficult because you don't have people don't understand that it's again not a short-term like satisfaction. You really have to do it for months or years to really see to grasp the full effect of how it works. And there are moments when you are, in like say you like we'll go back to school, like you get a bad test grade back, or you don't do as well as you thought you did, and you have to be like, okay, what part of this is one affecting how I feel now? And then, like you said, you go on a longer time horizon and be like, okay, in a week or in a month, will I care about this number on the paper? And the answer is most likely no, unless it's going to drastically sink your grade or drop you out of college or something a little major than the now. It's being able to frame your kind of reality and understand what matters and what like doesn't, I think is very powerful. So continue with your third point.
Yeah. So the third point is probably something that I realized like very recently is that you have to be happy with yourself. Like even if it's like what you see in the mirror is like shitty or what you see in your bank account is like shitty, like you have to be happy with yourself because your self-image is really important. So this is also the reason I recommend to many people reading Cybernetics by Dr. I think Maxwell or Matz. I can't remember the name, but yeah. So basically, the reason I recommend that book so highly is that he talks really well about the self-image. It's like when you have a thought like it's like, oh, I'm stupid or I'm like whatever. It's like, no, that's not a limiting belief because it doesn't hold you back. That becomes your destination. Like if you think negatively, right? And most people don't like, they always think like, oh, I'm not enough. Like I want to be like this person. I want to be like that person. Like, for example, I'm Asian. Like there's like these people called BTS that like look really great. They can sing, they can dance. Like, I'm like, oh, how can I compare, right?
Yeah.
But basically, if you think that you can't do sales, then you're not going to do well on a sales call. And I reframe my mind saying like, oh, I'm going to sell. Like my product's great. Like why wouldn't people buy it? And immediately next day I got my first client.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the main thing is you need to be able to love yourself for who you are right now, because if you can't have that, then like no one can give that to you. Like you can't go into a relationship looking for that, because like that's not how it works. You're gonna just have a really bad relationship. And during this journey, you're gonna see like the really beautiful part of you about how you stay driven, and you're also gonna see the ugly part where like you're going, but you kind of start feeling lazy and you start kind of like slowing down, and maybe you're not as motivated as when you started, and you're just asking yourself like, "Oh, why am I like this?"
Mhm.
It's just that you need to understand that there's phases in life where you are doing great and you're not, and you just have to be happy with who you are, but always striving to be even better than who you are right now.
I think I like your point a lot because I will see people who like they do things out of self-hatred, and I feel like that self-hating motivation can be powerful, but also is damaging
It's
because
not sustainable.
yeah, you are always kind of you're not doing it because you are accepting that where you are now is okay, but that you want to be better. You're doing it because you absolutely despise who you are now. And I feel like
Hmm.
your actions will kind of be drastically different, even though you have the same goal. And they might be more aggressive and less forgiving to yourself. And if you can't learn to forgive yourself, like you said, you can't really build relationships with other people. Like, how are you expected to, forgive other people and if you can't forgive yourself? So I think that's really powerful. I think those 3 points are definitely something that a lot of people have gone through and kind of noticed as like, looking back, like kind of what led to what. I know. I think that's actually fantastic. Like it's really good to know that there's other people out there that are doing the. I feel like I said before, entrepreneurship is lonely, but if you have a group of entrepreneurs who understand what you do and do what you do, you don't feel as because you can feel kind of crazy. As sometimes you feel like
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how can I work for this long? Like how can I you look at the clock and 5 hours have gone by and you feel like it's been you don't okay. I want to touch on this as well. Do you feel like from when you started out, this will be the last question. From when you started out, were you, I feel like, I'll do an example. This summer, I felt like before I started anything, I felt like the days were way too long and I would, great look forward to going to bed and the day being over. And I felt like I was just kind of trying to push through life and make the hours go by and waste time and find ways to fill it. But now on the other side, after, starting all of this, I feel like I need 48-hour days. I need 52-hour days. Like I feel like there is never enough time in the day to do what I need to get done and feel like I have successfully completed. So do you kind of,
Hmm.
what would your main takeaway being, how would you, one, how do you maximize your productivity? And do you also kind of feel like in comparison, how has time relatively changed for you?
Yeah. So yeah, I also felt that when I first started, because beforehand I was like, like a normal like person in our generation. Just like, you wake up like during COVID, just play games all day, have the
Yep.
Zoom for the class on the side,
Mhm.
just talking with your friends, and you're like suddenly, oh shoot, it's 12, it's time to go to sleep. Or maybe it's like, oh shoot, it's 2 a.m., I have to go to sleep. And like the days go by and you don't really think about the time. You're like, okay, we'll just play tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
But when I first started on the journey, I was like, okay, shoot, I gotta sleep like 6 to 8 hours. I like sleeping 8 hours because if you sleep 6 hours for me, like especially if I sleep 6 hours consecutively, I just start getting sick or I start performing less well.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, that's 8 hours gone. So I only have 16 hours left in the day. Okay, I need to eat. So that's like maybe 2 hours for like 3 meals, right?
Mhm.
Okay, that's like 14 hours. Okay, I need to commute to school. That's like an hour. Okay, I have 13 hours. Oh wait, like I need to walk around in classes. Okay, that's like 12 hours. And then, oh wait, my classes are like 5 hours every day. So like it just goes down and down and down. And you're like, this isn't enough time.
Mhm.
Because when you first start out, you probably like maybe you bought a course or you found this YouTube training that like could get you like in whatever industry that it's not even like agency or like YouTube automation or whatever you're doing, you have to learn. There's an education period, and that one takes time.
Mhm.
Time that you have to invest into watching, time you have to invest in taking notes and making sure you understand it. Because when I first started business, I couldn't really understand a lot of the principles.
Mhm.
I understood the logic, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. I just kept on watching the content over and over. Eventually, it made sense to me. I remember like I was doing that during like school. I would wake up at 5 and watch like 3 or 4 hours of like E-Man's courses. I got E-Man's
Yep.
courses. And then I was watch that because I knew that maybe it wasn't like updated to like the best thing right now because I got it a little bit late compared to like when it came out.
Mhm.
But it did lay the foundation for me to keep on going forwards. And I knew that I needed to watch all this so that I know what I'm doing, or if things have changed, I can just already have the foundation. And that's when I was like, fuck, I don't have enough time. I need to do homework. And actually, it's like changed recently because once you start doing work like outreach and stuff, you're like, okay, I need to send like 100 emails manually. Like, I like blind like BCC like the emails, like send it to 10 people, like keep on doing it like on spreadsheets with different emails. I got like instantly, and I got like tools that automate like my things, so I can just scrape like with like a click of a button. I can send out the emails and just keep on running and just like reply to the ones that people give responses to. And it's cut down my workload by a lot because on the first day I used Instantly and like D7 Lead Finder, I like didn't know there was a bulk search, so I manually typed in each city and like downloaded it. And the list cleaner I was using at the time wasn't that great, so I had to like manually go into the Excel sheet and delete it. Like the list cleaner would mark which one was good, which one wasn't, and I would have to go to Excel and literally manually delete like thousands of emails, like for 100 different cities. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I went over and I found like my mentor recommended me a different like email verifier, which automatically did it for me. I was like, thank God. And so like as I learned more, I also learned about how do I get more time for myself. Like it's kind of like studying. And studying isn't just about getting good grades. It's also how do I study faster and more efficiently so I have more time for myself to develop myself to get to the gym. Entrepreneurship's kind of like that too. You can't be complacent and be like, you need to think about optimizing everything, like improving on everything. Like if it's taking me 8 hours, like let's say if Elon Musk or like Andrew Tate sat down and did the exact same task, how long would it take them? And you'll probably say like maybe less than me, like anyway, like an hour, 6 hours, like for like an 8 hour task. They're like, okay, what are they doing that I'm not doing? And then you try to know that there's always like a level above you, and you need to be thinking about optimizing your time, because if you can remove yourself from spending 8 hours on outreach, then you can spend like maybe 1 hour on outreach and 7 hours on other stuff. And that's going to take you a lot further because you just saved 7 hours of your time every single day going forward.
So would you say, for a closing thought, that the way to be productive is, well, we'll go back to what you said originally, is kind of one, dopamine detoxing and, making sure you can do the work for long periods of time. And then when you can do the work for long periods of time, finding ways to take the monotonous tasks and use, technology and AI to kind of automate those. And then also kind of frame your mental in a way where you can understand that you need to, if you act the part, I feel like you kind of become the part a little bit. So, acting the part of hardcore entrepreneur might actually, if you feel a little phony at first, you can kind of, one, get the confidence in yourself of what you're doing. If you, kind of fake it till you make it a little bit and are able to, I think as we close, I want to talk about, I feel like a lot of people, I think it's good you brought up Eman because a lot of people kind of find him first because he was probably one of the bigger channels. And I think having someone to emulate is a lot more powerful than people think. Having not an idol, but having somebody like, wow, that guy's really cool. I think that kind of helps you, because if you think about something, it would be hard to imagine what it would feel like to ride a dragon, right? Like no one has ever documented that. No, you don't know what that looks like. You don't know how that feels. But if you have a long list of video documenting exactly what his life looked like, his videos go over what he does, how he does it, where he goes, his day-to-day, like you can see like that lifestyle is really good and I want that. And you can, if someone asked you to explain what he does, you'd be like, oh yeah. So I think it kind of helps you frame your goals with actual evidence that exists rather than, like no one's seen a dragon. So I feel like that's very interesting. So what would you say would be I guess two things, your final statement and anything you want to give to the audience as we end. And also, by the way, if you were listening to this and like what Will said, I will link all the socials down below and you can go ahead and follow him, reach out. He loves talking about things like this. So Yeah. And what question do you have for the next person on the podcast? I like to, make one continuous. So what would you ask the next person?
What would I ask the next person? I think what I would like to ask is, what were the fears holding you back from starting originally? Like, were you an overthinker and you just thought that this path was futile and I'll just stick with the safer path? And what made you finally like jump over that edge? Like, you don't know what was over it. Like, none of us know we don't know, right? And I think the first step of overcoming like who you are right now is to overcome ignorance. Is to know what you don't know, like, or identify what you don't know, and then like kind of like work towards filling that void. So I want to ask the next person, what were the challenges? What are the fears that were holding you back from taking the leap? And what finally made you gain the courage? What gave you the courage to jump over the cliff and see if there's water underneath, or if you're just falling to your doom? Like, oh, maybe it's not even a cliff, it's like some street art that someone like painted. So who knows?
Interesting. I think I'm excited to hear what the person says to that. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a really fantastic talk. I really like what you had to say, and hopefully, maybe like a year or two, we'll have you back on and just kind of check in and see how's it going.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jackson.